The Curse of the Pharaohs is real or fiction? Navigating between reality and sorcery? The Curse of the Pharaohs refers to the belief that anyone who disturbs the mummy of an ancient Egyptian person, especially if it was a pharaoh, is subject to a curse. This curse, which does not differentiate between thieves and well-meaning archaeologists, has caused bad luck, disease, or death. Since the mid-20th century, many have discussed books and documentaries that curse caused by explanatory scientific causes such as bacteria or radiation. However, the modern origins of Egyptian tales about the mummy's curse are primarily in European cultures, the shift from magic to science to explain curses, and their changing uses of the disorder of the dead to amuse the masses in horror film, indicating that Egyptian curses are primarily a cultural rather than exclusively scientific phenomenon. There are occasional cases of true ancient curses appearing inside or on the facade of a tomb, as in the case of the mastaba, ancient Egyptian burial, of Kentika, my brother of the 6th dynasty at Saqqara. They appear apparently as direct guidance to the priests to carefully protect the tomb and maintain ritual purity rather than warn of possible thieves. Although there are stories of curses dating back to the 19th century, they multiplied in the wake of Howard Carter's discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. Despite popular misconceptions, there was no truce in curse present in Pharaoh's tomb. Evidence for such curses related to King Tutankhamun has been considered to be so scanty that it is viewed as a pure claptrap by Donald Redford. The discovery of the Curse of the Pharaohs. Tutankhamun. The legend of the Curse of the Pharaohs began at the opening of the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922 AD, and the first thing that caught their attention was inscriptions saying, "Death will strike with the wings of the poisonous whoever disturbs the peace of the king." Many workers researching the cemetery, which puzzled scientists and people, and made many believe in what was called the Curse of the Pharaohs, including some archaeologists who participated in the discovery of the civilizations of the pharaohs, that the priests of ancient Egypt had poured their curse on anyone who tried to transfer those relics from its place. It was said that a strong sandstorm erupted around the tomb of Tutankhamun on the day it was opened, and a falcon was seen flying over the tomb. It is known that the falcon is one of the sacred symbols of the pharaohs. But there is a German scientist who opened the file of this phenomenon that preoccupied many to explain to us, with reason, medicine, and chemistry, how 40 scientists and researchers died before it was too late, and the reason is that the young king, Tutankhamun. Although this king has no historical value, and perhaps he was a ruler who did not, he does a lot. Perhaps in the era of a counter-revolution against King Akhenaten, he was the first to call for monotheism. But it is certain that this young king derived his great importance from the fact that his tomb was untouched by any of the thieves. It reached us after 33 centuries, completely intact, and that this, the king, is also the source of the pharaonic curse. All those who touched him or touched him were chased by death one after the other, recording the most amazing and strangest kind of punishment known to man. The clear thing is that these 40 died. But the mysterious thing is that death is for very trivial reasons and in incomprehensible circumstances. Scientists could not explain it with a clear scientific explanation. Tutankhamun, owner of the tomb, sarcophagus, and curses, ruled Egypt for 9 years from 1358 to 1349 BC. His tomb was discovered by Howard Carter, and years of torment, sweat, and despair began. On November 6, 1922 AD, Howard went to Lord Carnarvon. He says to him, "Finally, I discovered something wonderful in the Valley of the Kings." November was accompanied by his daughter. Howard advanced and broke the seals and doors, one after the other, until he was a short distance from the burial room of King Tutankhamun. The story of the curse began with the golden canary bird that Carter carried with him when he came to Luxor. And when the tomb was discovered, at first they called it the Golden Bird Cemetery. In his book, The King's Theft by Mohsen Muhammad, it was stated that when Howard traveled to Cairo to be received by the Lord, his assistant Calendar put the bird on the balcony to enjoy the breezes. On the day of the opening of the tomb, Calendar heard a distress call. Weak as a signal cry, he hurried to find a cobra snake extending its tongue to the bird inside the cage. Calendar killed the snake, but the bird was dead. Immediately it was said that the curse began with the opening of the cemetery, as the cobra snake is found on the crown that is placed above the head of statues of kings. Egypt. This was the beginning of the king's revenge against those who disturbed him in his shrine. On the other hand, archaeologist Henry Breasted believed that something terrible would happen on the way, but what happened after that was a strange thing that turned with the passage of time into a supernatural phenomenon and one of the mysterious things that sparked a lot of controversy and that science has not found an explanation for until today. During the official celebration of the opening of the cemetery, Muhammad Zakaria fell ill with a mysterious fever for which none of the doctors could find an explanation. At exactly midnight, Muhammad Zakaria died in Cairo. The strangest thing was that the electricity supply was cut off in Cairo without any apparent reason in the same moment of death, and the newspapers of the world highlighted the news of the death of Muhammad Zakaria. The Cairo newspapers linked the death of Muhammad Zakaria with turning off the lights and claimed that this was done by the order of King Tut, and some newspapers said that Muhammad Zakaria's finger was injured by a machine or a poison spear inside the cemetery and that the poison is strong as evidence it retained its effect for 3,000 years. She said that a type of bacteria grew inside the tomb that carried disease and death, and in Paris, the astronomer Lancelin said, Tutankhamun had avenged recent accounts of curses. The hieroglyphs were not deciphered until the beginning of the 19th century by Jean-François Champollion, so any reports of curses prior to that date would fall under the misfortune of dealing with mummy and other artifacts from tombs. Louis Pincher wrote an account in 1699 where he recorded how a Polish traveler bought 2 mummies and embarked on a cruise with these mummies in the cargo hold. Disturbed by the repeated visions of 2 ghosts and a sea storm that did not subside until the mummies were dumped into the sea. Zahi Hawass, an archaeologist and excavator at Kalmabu Bilo, stated that he moved a number of artifacts from the Greco-Roman site. On the day he did this, his cousin died, and in memory of that day his uncle died, and on the 3rd anniversary of him his aunt died. Years later, when he dug the tombs of the pyramid builders at Giza, he faced this curse: whoever enters this tomb, or does evil deeds against it, or destroy it, the crocodile will be their opponent in the water, and the snakes their opponent on the ground. The hippopotamus may be against them in the water, and the scorpion against them on the water. Although he was not superstitious, he decided not to disturb the mummies. However, he later participated in transporting 2 of the mummy's children from the Bahariya oasis to the museum and later stated that he was being attacked by children in his dreams. This phenomenon did not stop until the father of the mummies was re-included with the children in the museum. Then he came to the conclusion that the mummy should not be displayed, although it is less harmful than allowing the general public to enter the tombs. Hawass recorded another incident related to a sick boy who loved ancient Egypt and then underwent a miracle of healing in the Egyptian Museum when he was looking into the eyes of the mummy of King Ahmose. The boy was then able to read everything he found in ancient Egyptian antiquities, especially those related to the Hyksos period. Real or fantasy? After that, calamities followed, and death began to reap the vast majority, if not all, who participated in the celebration, and most of the deaths were due to that mysterious fever with delirium and shiver that leads to death. In fact, it was more than a fever in many cases. A secretary died, Howard Carter, without any reason, and then his father committed suicide out of grief for him. During the funeral of the secretary, the horse who was pulling the coffin cart trampled a young child and killed him. Many of those who contributed in one way or another to the discovery of the cemetery went crazy, and some committed suicide without any reason, which baffled archaeologists who found themselves in front of a mystery that has no explanation, and it is worth noting that many archaeologists have stated that this curse of the pharaohs is just a myth, and the deaths that occurred cannot go beyond chance, and the evidence for this is Howard Carter himself, the owner of the discovery of the tomb of the pharaoh Tutankhamun, which did not happen to him anything, and despite that, many of them do not dare to discover other pharaonic tombs, not even to visit the pharaonic monuments. Most of the wealthy who acquired some of the expensive pharaonic antiquities and statues disposed of them, including fear of that alleged curse. But the truth that some people believe is that there is no curse of the pharaohs, with evidence that the tombs that open and people die in are closed for thousands of years, so the air must spoil in them, which causes suffocation and then death when inhaling this air. Others claim that these accidents and suicides were because of the jinn, with evidence that it is known about the pharaohs that they were one of the most powerful magicians of the world. They may have defended the cemeteries by harnessing the jinn to defend them, but scientists have not yet found a scientific explanation for this phenomenon. Curse of King Tutankhamun. Belief in the curse piqued the interest of many due to the mysterious deaths of some members of Howard Carter's team and other notable visitors to the tomb shortly thereafter. The Carter team opened the tomb of Tutankhamun, KV 62, in 1922 AD, ushering in the new era of Egyptology. The famous Egyptologist James Henry Breasted worked with Carter shortly after the tomb was first opened. Report how Carter sent a messenger to errand his house. On his way home, he thought he had heard a faint sound like someone's crying, and upon arriving at the entrance he saw a bird cage occupied by cobras, the symbol of the Egyptian monarchy. Canary Carter died on the mouth, and this fueled local rumors of the curse. Arthur Weigel, the former Inspector General of Egyptian Government Antiquities, reported that this was explained by the fact that Carter's house was broken into by the same royal cobra that protects the king's head to strike enemies on the same day that the king's tomb was broken. The New York Times reported on the 22nd of this incident. December 1922 AD, the first mysterious death was Lord Carnarvon. He was bitten by a mosquito, and later, while accidentally shaving the bite wound. Then he became infected, which led to blood poisoning. 2 weeks before Carnarvon's death, Marie Corelli wrote a fictional letter to the New York World in which she quoted a mysterious book that asserted that terrible punishment would be inflicted on the intruder of the sealed tomb. This was followed by a revolution in the media, with reports that a curse was found on the king's tomb, but this is not true. Arthur Conan Doyle, author of Sherlock Holmes, suggested at the time that Carnarvon's death occurred due to items placed by Tutankhamun's priests to protect the royal tomb, and this contributed to increased media attention. Arthur stated that, 6 weeks before Carnarvon's death, he saw him laughing and making jokes when he entered the king's tomb and witnessed him telling a nearby reporter, H. F. Mortan, "I'm going to give him 6 weeks to live." The first autopsy of King Tutankhamun's body by Dr. Derry found a healed scar on the king's left cheek, but since Carnarvon had been buried 6 months earlier, it was not possible to determine whether the location of the wound on the king matched the fatal mosquito bite of Carnarvon. In 1925, anthropologist Henry Field and Breasted visited a shrine and noted the kindness of Wood Carter. He also reported how a paperweight given to Carter's friend, Sir Bruce Ingham, of a mummified hand with a wrist and a bracelet bearing the sign of a cursed, moved my body. Fire, water, and pestilence shall come to him. Shortly after receiving the gift, Ingram's house burned down, followed by a flood when it was rebuilt. Howard Carter was completely skeptical of curses. In his memoirs, he quoted The Stranger, explaining that in May 1926 he saw a jackal of the same type as Anubis, the guardian of the dead, for the first time in more than 35 years of working in the desert. Skeptics noted that many of those who visited or helped discover the tomb lived long, healthy lives. The study showed that of the 85 people who were present when the tomb and coffin were opened, only 8 were killed within 10 years. All the others were alive, including Howard Carter, who later died of lymphoma at the age of 64 in 1939. Possible explanations. Possible explanations. Some speculated that there would have been a deadly fungus planted in the enclosed tombs that were released into the air when they were opened. Arthur Conan Doyle favors this idea, and speculates that fungi were deliberately created to punish grave robbers. While there is no evidence that these pathogens killed Lord Carnarvon, there is no doubt that dangerous substances were accumulating in the ancient tombs. However, in the concentrations present, it is usually only dangerous pathogens for people with weakened immunity. Air samples taken from inside the coffin openings showed high levels of formaldehyde, ammonia, and hydrogen sulfide, all of which are toxic, but they were easily detected by their strong odors. Hydrogen sulfide is detectable in low concentrations, up to 100 ppm, and acts as a nerve agent on the sense of smell, though 1000 ppm, capable of killing a person for the first inhalation. Deaths attributed to Tutankhamun's curse. The tomb was opened on the 29th of February, 1922 AD. Lord Carnarvon, the financial supporter of the excavation team, was present during the opening of the tomb. He died on the 5th of April, 1923 AD, after being bitten by a mosquito and infected him. He died 4 months and 7 days after opening the tomb. George J. Gould died in the French Riviera on May 16, 1923, after developing a fever after visiting a grave. The Egyptian Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy died on July 10, 1923, shot dead by his wife. Honorable Colonel Aubrey Herbert, Member of Parliament, Carnarvon's half-brother, became completely blind and died on the 26th of September, 1923 CE, due to blood poisoning through a dental operation aimed at restoring his sight. Wolf Joel, a South African millionaire and tomb visitor, was shot dead in Johannesburg on November 13, 1923, by blackmailer Baron Kurt von Belthium, whose real name was Carl Friedrich Moritz Coetzee. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, the physician who x-rayed the mummy of Tutankhamun, died on January 15, 1924 CE, from a mysterious illness. Sir Lee Stack, Governor-General of Sudan, died on November 19, 1924 AD, assassinated while driving in Cairo. Arthur Cruttendon Mace A.C. Mace, a member of Carter's excavation team, died in 1928 of arsenic poisoning. Honorable Mervyn Herbert, the half-brother of Carnarvon and the brother of the aforementioned Aubrey Herbert, died on May 25, 1929 AD, according to what was reported, of malaria pneumonia. Honorable Commander Richard Bathell, Carter's personal secretary, died on November 15, 1929, after being found suffocated in his bed. Richard Luttrell Pilkington Bathall, 3rd Baron of Westbury, father of the above-mentioned, died on February 20, 1930 AD, supposedly throwing himself from the 7th floor of his apartment. Howard Carter opened his cemetery on February 16, 1923, and died more than a decade later on March 2, 1939. However, some still attribute his death to a curse. The Curse of the Pharaohs is real or fiction? Navigating between reality and sorcery? The Curse of the Pharaohs refers to the belief that anyone who disturbs the mummy of an ancient Egyptian person, especially if it was a pharaoh, is subject to a curse. This curse, which does not differentiate between thieves and well-meaning archaeologists, has caused bad luck, disease, or death. Since the mid-20th century, many have discussed books and documentaries that curse caused by explanatory scientific causes such as bacteria or radiation. However, the modern origins of Egyptian tales about the mummy's curse are primarily in European cultures, the shift from magic to science to explain curses, and their changing uses of the disorder of the dead to amuse the masses in horror film, indicating that Egyptian curses are primarily a cultural rather than exclusively scientific phenomenon. There are occasional cases of true ancient curses appearing inside or on the facade of a tomb, as in the case of the mastaba, ancient Egyptian burial, of Kentika, my brother of the 6th dynasty at Saqqara. They appear apparently as direct guidance to the priests to carefully protect the tomb and maintain ritual purity rather than warn of possible thieves. Although there are stories of curses dating back to the 19th century, they multiplied in the wake of Howard Carter's discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. Despite popular misconceptions, there was no true sin curse present in Pharaoh's tomb. Evidence for such curses related to King Tutankhamun has been considered to be so scanty that it is viewed as a pure claptrap by Donald Redford. The discovery of the curse of the pharaohs. Tutankhamun. The legend of the curse of the pharaohs began at the opening of the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922 AD, and the first thing that caught their attention was inscriptions saying, "Death will strike with the wings of the poisonous whoever disturbs the peace of the king." Many workers researching the cemetery, which puzzled scientists and people, and made many believe in what was called the curse of the pharaohs, including some archaeologists who participated in the discovery of the civilizations of the pharaohs, that the priests of ancient Egypt had poured their curse on anyone who tried to transfer those relics from its place. It was said that a strong sandstorm erupted around the tomb of Tutankhamun on the day it was opened, and a falcon was seen flying over the tomb. It is known that the falcon is one of the sacred symbols of the pharaohs. But there is a German scientist who opened the file of this phenomenon that preoccupied many to explain to us, with reason, medicine and chemistry, how 40 scientists and researchers died before it was too late, and the reason is that the young king, Tutankhamun. Although this king has no historical value, and perhaps he was a ruler who did not, he does a lot. Perhaps in the era of a counter-revolution against King Akhenaten, he was the first to call for monotheism. But it is certain that this young king derived his great importance from the fact that his tomb was untouched by any of the thieves. It reached us after 33 centuries completely intact, and that this, the king, is also the source of the pharaonic curse. All those who touched him were chased by death one after the other, recording the most amazing and strangest kind of punishment known to man. The clear thing is that these 40 died. But the mysterious thing is that death is for very trivial reasons and in incomprehensible circumstances. Scientists could not explain it with a clear scientific explanation. Tutankhamun, owner of the tomb, sarcophagus and curses, ruled Egypt for 9 years from 1358 to 1349 BC. His tomb was discovered by Howard Carter, and years of torment, sweat and despair began. On November 6, 1922 AD, Howard went to Lord Carnarvon. He says to him, "Finally, I discovered something wonderful in the Valley of the Kings." November was accompanied by his daughter. Howard advanced and broke the seals and doors, one after the other, until he was a short distance from the burial room of King Tutankhamun. The story of the curse began with the golden canary bird that Carter carried with him when he came to Luxor. And when the tomb was discovered, at first they called it the Golden Bird Cemetery. In his book, The King's Theft by Mohsen Muhammad, it was stated that when Howard traveled to Cairo to be received by the Lord, his assistant Calendar put the bird on the balcony to enjoy the breezes. On the day of the opening of the tomb, Calendar heard a distress call. Weak as a signal cry, he hurried to find a cobra snake extending its tongue to the bird inside the cage. Calendar killed the snake, but the bird was dead. Immediately it was said that the curse began with the opening of the cemetery, as the cobra snake is found on the crown that is placed above the head of statues of kings. Egypt. This was the beginning of the king's revenge against those who disturbed him in his shrine. On the other hand, archaeologist Henry Breasted believed that something terrible would happen on the way, but what happened after that was a strange thing that turned with the passage of time into a supernatural phenomenon and one of the mysterious things that sparked a lot of controversy and that science has not found an explanation for until today. During the official celebration of the opening of the cemetery, Muhammad Zakaria fell ill with a mysterious fever for which none of the doctors could find an explanation. At exactly midnight, Muhammad Zakaria died in Cairo. The strangest thing was that the electricity supply was cut off in Cairo without any apparent reason in the same moment of death, and the newspapers of the world highlighted the news of the death of Muhammad Zakaria. The Cairo newspapers linked the death of Muhammad Zakaria with turning off the lights and claimed that this was done by the order of King Tut, and some newspapers said that Muhammad Zakaria's finger was injured by a machine or a poison spear inside the cemetery and that the poison is strong as evidence it retained its effect for 3,000 years. She said that a type of bacteria grew inside the tomb that carried disease and death, and in Paris, the astronomer Lancelin said, Tutankhamun had avenged recent accounts of curses. The hieroglyphs were not deciphered until the beginning of the 19th century by Jean-François Champollion, so any reports of curses prior to that date would fall under the misfortune of dealing with mummy and other artifacts from tombs. Louis Pincher wrote an account in 1699 where he recorded how a Polish traveler bought 2 mummies and embarked on a cruise with these mummies in the cargo hold. Disturbed by the repeated visions of 2 ghosts and a sea storm that did not subside until the mummies were dumped into the sea. Zahi Hawass, an archaeologist and excavator at Kalmabu Bilo, stated that he moved a number of artifacts from the Greco-Roman site. On the day he did this, his cousin died, and in memory of that day his uncle died, and on the 3rd anniversary of him his aunt died. Years later, when he dug the tombs of the pyramid builders at Giza, he faced this curse: whoever enters this tomb, or does evil deeds against it, or destroy it, the crocodile will be their opponent in the water, and the snakes their opponent on the ground. The hippopotamus may be against them in the water, and the scorpion against them on the water. Although he was not superstitious, he decided not to disturb the mummies. However, he later participated in transporting 2 of the mummy's children from the Bahariya oasis to the museum and later stated that he was being attacked by children in his dreams. This phenomenon did not stop until the father of the mummies was re-included with the children in the museum. Then he came to the conclusion that the mummy should not be displayed, although it is less harmful than allowing the general public to enter the tombs. Hawass recorded another incident related to a sick boy who loved ancient Egypt and then underwent a miracle of healing in the Egyptian Museum when he was looking into the eyes of the mummy of King Ahmose. The boy was then able to read everything he found in ancient Egyptian antiquities, especially those related to the Hyksos period. Real or fantasy? After that, calamities followed, and death began to reap the vast majority, if not all, who participated in the celebration, and most of the deaths were due to that mysterious fever with delirium and shiver that leads to death. In fact, it was more than a fever in many cases. A secretary died, Howard Carter, without any reason, and then his father committed suicide out of grief for him. During the funeral of the secretary, the horse who was pulling the coffin cart trampled a young child and killed him. Many of those who contributed in one way or another to the discovery of the cemetery went crazy, and some committed suicide without any reason, which baffled archaeologists who found themselves in front of a mystery that has no explanation, and it is worth noting that many archaeologists have stated that this curse of the pharaohs is just a myth, and the deaths that occurred cannot go beyond chance, and the evidence for this is Howard Carter himself, the owner of the discovery of the tomb of the pharaoh Tutankhamun, which did not happen to him anything, and despite that, many of them do not dare to discover other pharaonic tombs, not even 2. Visit the pharaonic monuments. Most of the wealthy who acquired some of the expensive pharaonic antiquities and statues disposed of them, including fear of that alleged curse. But the truth that some people believe is that there is no curse of the pharaohs, with evidence that the tombs that open and people die in are closed for thousands of years, so the air must spoil in them, which causes suffocation and then death when inhaling this air. Others claim that these accidents and suicides were because of the jinn, with evidence that it is known about the pharaohs that they were one of the most powerful magicians of the world. They may have defended the cemeteries by harnessing the jinn to defend them, but scientists have not yet found a scientific explanation for this phenomenon. Curse of King Tutankhamun. Belief in the curse piqued the interest of many due to the mysterious deaths of some members of Howard Carter's team and other notable visitors to the tomb shortly thereafter. The Carter team opened the tomb of Tutankhamun, KV 62, in 1922 AD, ushering in the new era of Egyptology. The famous Egyptologist James Henry Breasted worked with Carter shortly after the tomb was first opened. Report how Carter sent a messenger to errand his house. On his way home, he thought he had heard a faint sound like someone's crying, and upon arriving at the entrance he saw a bird cage occupied by cobras, the symbol of the Egyptian monarchy. Canary Carter died on the mouth, and this fueled local rumors of the curse. Arthur Weigel, the former Inspector General of Egyptian Government Antiquities, reported that this was explained by the fact that Carter's house was broken into by the same royal cobra that protects the king's head to strike enemies on the same day that the king's tomb was broken. The New York Times reported on the 22nd of this incident. December 1922 AD, the first mysterious death was Lord Carnarvon. He was bitten by a mosquito, and later, while accidentally shaving the bite wound. Then he became infected, which led to blood poisoning. 2 weeks before Carnarvon's death, Marie Corelli wrote a fictional letter to the New York World in which she quoted a mysterious book that asserted that terrible punishment would be inflicted on the intruder of the sealed tomb. This was followed by a revolution in the media, with reports that a curse was found on the king's tomb, but this is not true. Arthur Conan Doyle, author of Sherlock Holmes, suggested at the time that Carnarvon's death occurred due to items placed by Tutankhamun's priests to protect the royal tomb, and this contributed to increased media attention. Arthur stated that, 6 weeks before Carnarvon's death, he saw him laughing and making jokes when he entered the king's tomb and witnessed him telling a nearby reporter, H. F. Mortan, "I'm going to give him 6 weeks to live." The first autopsy of King Tutankhamun's body by Dr. Derry found a healed scar on the king's left cheek, but since Carnarvon had been buried 6 months earlier, it was not possible to determine whether the location of the wound on the king matched the fatal mosquito bite of Carnarvon. In 1925, anthropologist Henry Field and Breasted visited a shrine and noted the kindness of Wood Carter. He also reported how a paperweight given to Carter's friend, Sir Bruce Ingham, of a mummified hand with a wrist and a bracelet bearing the sign of a curse, moved my body. Fire, water, and pestilence shall come to him. Shortly after receiving the gift, Ingram's house burned down, followed by a flood when it was rebuilt. Howard Carter was completely skeptical of curses. In his memoirs, he quoted The Stranger, explaining that in May 1926 he saw a jackal of the same type as Anubis, the guardian of the dead, for the first time in more than 35 years of working in the desert. Skeptics noted that many of those who visited or helped discover the tomb lived long, healthy lives. The study showed that of the 85 people who were present when the tomb and coffin were opened, only 8 were killed within 10 years. All the others were alive, including Howard Carter, who later died of lymphoma at the age of 64 in 1939. Possible explanations. Possible explanations. Some speculated that there would have been a deadly fungus planted in the enclosed tombs that were released into the air when they were opened. Arthur Conan Doyle favors this idea, and speculates that fungi were deliberately created to punish grave robbers. While there is no evidence that these pathogens killed Lord Carnarvon, there is no doubt that dangerous substances were accumulating in the ancient tombs. However, in the concentrations present, it is usually only dangerous pathogens for people with weakened immunity. Air samples taken from inside the coffin openings showed high levels of formaldehyde, ammonia, and hydrogen sulfide, all of which are toxic, but they were easily detected by their strong odors. Hydrogen sulfide is detectable in low concentrations, up to 100 ppm, and acts as a nerve agent on the sense of smell, though 1000 ppm, capable of killing a person for the first inhalation. Deaths attributed to Tutankhamun's curse. The tomb was opened on the 29th of February, 1922 AD. Lord Carnarvon, the financial supporter of the excavation team, was present during the opening of the tomb. He died on the 5th of April, 1923 AD, after being bitten by a mosquito and infected him. He died 4 months and 7 days after opening the tomb. George J. Gould died in the French Riviera on May 16, 1923, after developing a fever after visiting a grave. The Egyptian Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy died on July 10, 1923, shot dead by his wife. Honorable Colonel Aubrey Herbert, Member of Parliament, Carnarvon's half-brother, became completely blind and died on the 26th of September, 1923 CE, due to blood poisoning through a dental operation aimed at restoring his sight. Wolf Joel, a South African millionaire and tomb visitor, was shot dead in Johannesburg on November 13, 1923, by blackmailer Baron Kurt von Belthium, whose real name was Carl Friedrich Moritz Coetzee. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, the physician who x-rayed the mummy of Tutankhamun, died on January 15, 1924 CE, from a mysterious illness. Sir Lee Stack, Governor-General of Sudan, died on November 19, 1924 AD, assassinated while driving in Cairo. Arthur Cruttendon Mace A.C. Mace, a member of Carter's excavation team, died in 1928 of arsenic poisoning. Honorable Mervyn Herbert, the half-brother of Carnarvon and the brother of the aforementioned Aubrey Herbert, died on May 25, 1929 AD, according to what was reported, of malaria pneumonia. Honorable Commander Richard Bathell, Carter's personal secretary, died on November 15, 1929, after being found suffocated in his bed. Richard Luttrell Pilkington Bathall, 3rd Baron of Westbury, father of the above-mentioned, died on February 20, 1930 AD, supposedly throwing himself from the 7th floor of his apartment. Howard Carter opened his cemetery on February 16, 1923, and died more than a decade later on March 2, 1939. However, some still attribute his death to a curse. The Curse of the Pharaohs is real or fiction? Navigating between reality and sorcery? The Curse of the Pharaohs refers to the belief that anyone who disturbs the mummy of an ancient Egyptian person, especially if it was a pharaoh, is subject to a curse. This curse, which does not differentiate between thieves and well-meaning archaeologists, has caused bad luck, disease, or death. Since the mid-20th century, many have discussed books and documentaries that curse caused by explanatory scientific causes such as bacteria or radiation. However, the modern origins of Egyptian tales about the mummy's curse are primarily in European cultures, the shift from magic to science to explain curses, and their changing uses of the disorder of the dead to amuse the masses in horror film, indicating that Egyptian curses are primarily a cultural rather than exclusively scientific. Phenomenon. There are occasional cases of true ancient curses appearing inside or on the facade of a tomb, as in the case of the mastaba, ancient Egyptian burial, of Kentika, my brother of the 6th dynasty at Saqqara. They appear apparently as direct guidance to the priests to carefully protect the tomb and maintain ritual purity rather than warn of possible thieves. Although there are stories of curses dating back to the 19th century, they multiplied in the wake of Howard Carter's discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. Despite popular misconceptions, there was no truce and curse present in Pharaoh's tomb. Evidence for such curses related to King Tutankhamun has been considered to be so scanty that it is viewed as a pure claptrap by Donald Redford. The discovery of the curse of the pharaohs. Tutankhamun. The legend of the curse of the pharaohs began at the opening of the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922 AD, and the first thing that caught their attention was inscriptions saying, "Death will strike with the wings of the poisonous whoever disturbs the peace of the king." Many workers researching the cemetery, which puzzled scientists and people, and made many believe in what was called the curse of the pharaohs, including some archaeologists who participated in the discovery of the civilizations of the pharaohs, that the priests of ancient Egypt had poured their curse on anyone who tried to transfer those relics from its place. It was said that a strong sandstorm erupted around the tomb of Tutankhamun on the day it was opened, and a falcon was seen flying over the tomb. It is known that the falcon is one of the sacred symbols of the pharaohs. But there is a German scientist who opened the file of this phenomenon that preoccupied many to explain to us, with reason, medicine and chemistry, how 40 scientists and researchers died before it was too late, and the reason is that the young king, Tutankhamun. Although this king has no historical value, and perhaps he was a ruler who did not, he does a lot. Perhaps in the era of a counter-revolution against King Akhenaten, he was the first to call for monotheism. But it is certain that this young king derived his great importance from the fact that his tomb was untouched by any of the thieves. It reached us after 33 centuries, completely intact, and that this, the king, is also the source of the pharaonic curse. All those who touched him were chased by death one after the other, recording the most amazing and strangest kind of punishment known to man. The clear thing is that these 40 died. But the mysterious thing is that death is for very trivial reasons and in incomprehensible circumstances. Scientists could not explain it with a clear scientific explanation. Tutankhamun, owner of the tomb, sarcophagus and curses, ruled Egypt for 9 years from 1358 to 1349 BC. His tomb was discovered by Howard Carter, and years of torment, sweat and despair began. On November 6, 1922 AD, Howard went to Lord Carnarvon. He says to him, "Finally, I discovered something wonderful in the Valley of the Kings." November was accompanied by his daughter. Howard advanced and broke the seals and doors, one after the other, until he was a short distance from the burial room of King Tutankhamun. The story of the curse began with the golden canary bird that Carter carried with him when he came to Luxor. And when the tomb was discovered, at first they called it the Golden Bird Cemetery. In his book, The King's Theft by Mohsen Muhammad, it was stated that when Howard traveled to Cairo to be received by the Lord, his assistant Calendar put the bird on the balcony to enjoy the breezes. On the day of the opening of the tomb, Calendar heard a distress call. Weak as a signal cry, he hurried to find a cobra snake extending its tongue to the bird inside the cage. Calendar killed the snake, but the bird was dead. Immediately it was said that the curse began with the opening of the cemetery, as the cobra snake is found on the crown that is placed above the head of statues of kings. Egypt. This was the beginning of the king's revenge against those who disturbed him in his shrine. On the other hand, archaeologist Henry Breasted believed that something terrible would happen on the way, but what happened after that was a strange thing that turned with the passage of time into a supernatural phenomenon and one of the mysterious things that sparked a lot of controversy and that science has not found an explanation for until today. This During the official celebration of the opening of the cemetery, Muhammad Zakaria fell ill with a mysterious fever for which none of the doctors could find an explanation. At exactly midnight, Muhammad Zakaria died in Cairo. The strangest thing was that the electricity supply was cut off in Cairo without any apparent reason in the same moment of death, and the newspapers of the world highlighted the news of the death of Muhammad Zakaria. The Cairo newspapers linked the death of Muhammad Zakaria with turning off the lights and claimed that this was done by the order of King Tut, and some newspapers said that Muhammad Zakaria's finger was injured by a machine or a poison spear inside the cemetery and that the poison is strong as evidence it retained its effect for 3,000 years. She said that a type of bacteria grew inside the tomb that carried disease and death, and in Paris, the astronomer Lancelin said, Tutankhamun had avenged recent accounts of curses. The hieroglyphs were not deciphered until the beginning of the 19th century by Jean-François Champollion, so any reports of curses prior to that date would fall under the misfortune of dealing with mummy and other artifacts from tombs. Louis Pincher wrote an account in 1699 where he recorded how a Polish traveler bought 2 mummies and embarked on a cruise with these mummies in the cargo hold. Disturbed by the repeated visions of 2 ghosts and a sea storm that did not subside until the mummies were dumped into the sea. Zahi Hawass, an archaeologist and excavator at Qalm Abu Bilo, stated that he moved a number of artifacts from the Greco-Roman site. On the day he did this, his cousin died, and in memory of that day his uncle died, and on the 3rd anniversary of him his aunt died. Years later, when he dug the tombs of the pyramid builders at Giza, he faced this curse: whoever enters this tomb, or does evil deeds against it, or destroy it, the crocodile will be their opponent in the water, and the snakes their opponent on the ground. The hippopotamus may be against them in the water, and the scorpion against them on the water. Although he was not superstitious, he decided not to disturb the mummies. However, he later participated in transporting 2 of the mummy's children from the Bahariya oasis to the museum and later stated that he was being attacked by children in his dreams. This phenomenon did not stop until the father of the mummies was re-included with the children in the museum. Then he came to the conclusion that the mummy should not be displayed, although it is less harmful than allowing the general public to enter the tombs. Hawass recorded another incident related to a sick boy who loved ancient Egypt and then underwent a miracle of healing in the Egyptian museum when he was looking into the eyes of the mummy of King Ahmose. The boy was then able to read everything he found in ancient Egyptian antiquities, especially those related to the Hyksos period. Real or fantasy? After that, calamities followed, and death began to reap the vast majority, if not all, who participated in the celebration, and most of the deaths were due to that mysterious fever with delirium and shiver that leads to death. In fact, it was more than a fever in many cases. A secretary died, Howard Carter, without any reason, and then his father committed suicide out of grief for him. During the funeral of the secretary, the horse who was pulling the coffin cart trampled a young child and killed him. Many of those who contributed in one way or another to the discovery of the cemetery went crazy, and some committed suicide without any reason, which baffled archaeologists who found themselves in front of a mystery that has no explanation, and it is worth noting that many archaeologists have stated that this curse of the pharaohs is just a myth, and the deaths that occurred cannot go beyond chance, and the evidence for this is Howard Carter himself, the owner of the discovery of the tomb of the pharaoh Tutankhamun, which did not happen to him anything, and despite that, many of them do not dare to discover other pharaonic tombs, not even to visit the pharaonic monuments. Most of the wealthy who acquired some of the expensive pharaonic antiquities and statues disposed of them, including fear of that alleged curse. But the truth that some people believe is that there is no curse of the pharaohs, with evidence that the tombs that open and people die in are closed for thousands of years, so the air must spoil in them, which causes suffocation and then death when inhaling this air. Others claim that these accidents and suicides were because of the jinn, with evidence that it is known about the pharaohs that they were one of the most powerful magicians of the world. They may have defended the cemeteries by harnessing the jinn to defend them, but scientists have not yet found a scientific explanation for this phenomenon. Curse of King Tutankhamun. Belief in the curse piqued the interest of many due to the mysterious deaths of some members of Howard Carter's team and other notable visitors to the tomb shortly thereafter. The Carter team opened the tomb of Tutankhamun, KV 62, in 1922 AD, ushering in the new era of Egyptology. The famous Egyptologist James Henry Breasted worked with Carter shortly after the tomb was first opened. Report how Carter sent a messenger to errand his house. On his way home, he thought he had heard a faint sound like someone's crying, and upon arriving at the entrance he saw a bird cage occupied by cobras, the symbol of the Egyptian monarchy. Canary Carter died on the mouth, and this fueled local rumors of the curse. Arthur Weigel, the former Inspector General of Egyptian government antiquities, reported that this was explained by the fact that Carter's house was broken into by the same royal cobra that protects the king's head to strike enemies on the same day that the king's tomb was broken. The New York Times reported on the 22nd of this incident. December 1922 AD, the first mysterious death was Lord Carnarvon. He was bitten by a mosquito, and later, while accidentally shaving the bite wound. Then he became infected, which led to blood poisoning. 2 weeks before Carnarvon's death, Marie Corelli wrote a fictional letter to the New York World in which she quoted a mysterious book that asserted that terrible punishment would be inflicted on the intruder of the sealed tomb. This was followed by a revolution in the media, with reports that a curse was found on the king's tomb, but this is not true. Arthur Conan Doyle, author of Sherlock Holmes, suggested at the time that Carnarvon's death occurred due to items placed by Tutankhamun's priests to protect the royal tomb, and this contributed to increased media attention. Arthur stated that, 6 weeks before Carnarvon's death, he saw him laughing and making jokes when he entered the king's tomb and witnessed him telling a nearby reporter, H. F. Mortan, "I'm going to give him 6 weeks to live." The first autopsy of King Tutankhamun's body by Dr. Derry found a healed scar on the king's left cheek, but since Carnarvon had been buried 6 months earlier, it was not possible to determine whether the location of the wound on the king matched the fatal mosquito bite of Carnarvon. In 1925, anthropologist Henry Field and Breasted visited a shrine and noted the kindness of Wood Carter. He also reported how a paperweight given to Carter's friend, Sir Bruce Ingham, of a mummified hand with a wrist and a bracelet bearing the sign of a cursed, moved my body. Fire, water, and pestilence shall come to him. Shortly after receiving the gift, Ingram's house burned down, followed by a flood when it was rebuilt. Howard Carter was completely skeptical of curses. In his memoirs, he quoted The Stranger, explaining that in May 1926 he saw a jackal of the same type as Anubis, the guardian of the dead, for the first time in more than 35 years of working in the desert. Skeptics noted that many of those who visited or helped discover the tomb lived long, healthy lives. The study showed that of the 85 people who were present when the tomb and coffin were opened, only 8 were killed within 10 years. All the others were alive, including Howard Carter, who later died of lymphoma at the age of 64 in 1939. Possible explanations. Possible explanations. Some speculated that there would have been a deadly fungus planted in the enclosed tombs that were released into the air when they were opened. Arthur Conan Doyle favors this idea, and speculates that fungi were deliberately created to punish grave robbers. While there is no evidence that these pathogens killed Lord Carnarvon, there is no doubt that dangerous substances were accumulating in the ancient tombs. However, in the concentrations present, it is usually only dangerous pathogens for people with weakened immunity. Air samples taken from inside the coffin openings showed high levels of formaldehyde, ammonia, and hydrogen sulfide, all of which are toxic, but they were easily detected by their strong odors. Hydrogen sulfide is detectable in low concentrations, up to 100 ppm, and acts as a nerve agent on the sense of smell, the 1000 ppm, capable of killing a person for the first inhalation. Deaths attributed to Tutankhamun's curse. The tomb was opened on the 29th of February, 1922 AD. Lord Carnarvon, the financial supporter of the excavation team, was present during the opening of the tomb. He died on the 5th of April, 1923 AD, after being bitten by a mosquito and infected him. He died 4 months and 7 days after opening the tomb. George J. Gould died in the French Riviera on May 16, 1923, after developing a fever after visiting a grave. The Egyptian prince Ali Kamel Fahmy died on July 10, 1923, shot dead by his wife. Honorable Colonel Aubrey Herbert, Member of Parliament, Carnarvon's half-brother, became completely blind and died on the 26th of September, 1923 CE, due to blood poisoning through a dental operation aimed at restoring his sight. Wolf Joel, a South African millionaire and tomb visitor, was shot dead in Johannesburg on November 13, 1923, by blackmailer Baron Kurt von Belthium, whose real name was Carl Friedrich Moritz Coetzee. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, the physician who x-rayed the mummy of Tutankhamun, died on January 15, 1924 CE, from a mysterious illness. Sir Lee Stack, Governor-General of Sudan, died on November 19, 1924 AD, assassinated while driving in Cairo. Arthur Cruttendon Mace A.C. Mace, a member of Carter's excavation team, died in 1928 of arsenic poisoning. Honorable Mervyn Herbert, the half-brother of Carnarvon and the brother of the aforementioned Aubrey Herbert, died on May 25, 1929 AD, according to what was reported, of malaria pneumonia. Honorable Commander Richard Bathell, Carter's personal secretary, died on November 15, 1929, after being found suffocated in his bed. Richard Letchell Pilkington Bathall, 3rd Baron of Westbury, father of the above-mentioned, died on February 20, 1930 AD, supposedly throwing himself from the 7th floor of his apartment. Howard Carter opened his cemetery on February 16, 1923, and died more than a decade later on March 2, 1939. However, some still attribute his death to a curse. The Curse of the Pharaohs is real or fiction? Navigating between reality and sorcery? The Curse of the Pharaohs refers to the belief that anyone who disturbs the mummy of an ancient Egyptian person, especially if it was a pharaoh, is subject to a curse. This curse, which does not differentiate between thieves and well-meaning archaeologists, has caused bad luck, disease, or death. Since the mid-20th century, many have discussed books and documentaries that curse caused by explanatory scientific causes such as bacteria or radiation. However, the modern origins of Egyptian tales about the mummy's curse are primarily in European cultures, the shift from magic to science to explain curses, and their changing uses of the disorder of the dead to amuse the masses in horror film, indicating that Egyptian curses are primarily a cultural rather than exclusively scientific phenomenon. There are occasional cases of true ancient curses appearing inside or on the facade of a tomb, as in the case of the mastaba, ancient Egyptian burial, of Kentika, my brother of the 6th dynasty at Saqqara. They appear apparently as direct guidance to the priests to carefully protect the tomb and maintain ritual purity rather than warn of possible thieves. Although there are stories of curses dating back to the 19th century, they multiplied in the wake of Howard Carter's discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. Despite popular misconceptions, there was no truce curse present in Pharaoh's tomb. Evidence for such curses related to King Tutankhamun has been considered to be so scanty that it is viewed as a pure claptrap by Donald Redford. The discovery of the curse of the pharaohs. Tutankhamun. The legend of the curse of the pharaohs began at the opening of the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922 AD, and the first thing that caught their attention was inscriptions saying, "Death will strike with the wings of the poisonous whoever disturbs the peace of the king." Many workers researching the cemetery, which puzzled scientists and people, and made many believe in what was called the curse of the pharaohs, including some archaeologists who participated in the discovery of the civilizations of the pharaohs, that the priests of ancient Egypt had poured their curse on anyone who tried to transfer those relics from its place. It was said that a strong sandstorm erupted around the tomb of Tutankhamun on the day it was opened, and a falcon was seen flying over the tomb. It is known that the falcon is one of the sacred symbols of the pharaohs. But there is a German scientist who opened the file of this phenomenon that preoccupied many to explain to us, with reason, medicine and chemistry, how 40 scientists and researchers died before it was too late, and the reason is that the young king, Tutankhamun. Although this king has no historical value, and perhaps he was a ruler who did not, he does a lot. Perhaps in the era of a counter-revolution against King Akhenaten, he was the first to call for monotheism. But it is certain that this young king derived his great importance from the fact that his tomb was untouched by any of the thieves. It reached us after 33 centuries, completely intact, and that this, the king, is also the source of the pharaonic curse. All those who touched him were chased by death one after the other, recording the most amazing and strangest kind of punishment known to man. The clear thing is that these 40 died. But the mysterious thing is that death is for very trivial reasons and in incomprehensible circumstances. Scientists could not explain it with a clear scientific explanation. Tutankhamun, owner of the tomb, sarcophagus and curses, ruled Egypt for 9 years from 1358 to 1349 BC. His tomb was discovered by Howard Carter, and years of torment, sweat and despair began. On November 6, 1922 AD, Howard went to Lord Carnarvon. He says to him, "Finally, I discovered something wonderful in the Valley of the Kings." November was accompanied by his daughter. Howard advanced and broke the seals and doors, one after the other, until he was a short distance from the burial room of King Tutankhamun. The story of the curse began with the golden canary bird that Carter carried with him when he came to Luxor. And when the tomb was discovered, at first they called it the Golden Bird Cemetery. In his book, The King's Theft by Mohsen Muhammad, it was stated that when Howard traveled to Cairo to be received by the Lord, his assistant Calendar put the bird on the balcony to enjoy the breezes. On the day of the opening of the tomb, Calendar heard a distress call. Weak as a signal cry, he hurried to find a cobra snake extending its tongue to the bird inside the cage. Calendar killed the snake, but the bird was dead. Immediately it was said that the curse began with the opening of the cemetery, as the cobra snake is found on the crown that is placed above the head of statues of kings. Egypt. This was the beginning of the king's revenge against those who disturbed him in his shrine. On the other hand, archaeologist Henry Breasted believed that something terrible would happen on the way, but what happened after that was a strange thing that turned with the passage of time into a supernatural phenomenon and one of the mysterious things that sparked a lot of controversy and that science has not found an explanation for until today. During the official celebration of the opening of the cemetery, Muhammad Zakaria fell ill with a mysterious fever for which none of the doctors could find an explanation. At exactly midnight, Muhammad Zakaria died in Cairo. The strangest thing was that the electricity supply was cut off in Cairo without any apparent reason in the same moment of death, and the newspapers of the world highlighted the news of the death of Muhammad Zakaria. The Cairo newspapers linked the death of Muhammad Zakaria with turning off the lights and claimed that this was done by the order of King Tut, and some newspapers said that Muhammad Zakaria's finger was injured by a machine or a poison spear inside the cemetery and that the poison is strong as evidence it retained its effect for 3,000 years. She said that a type of bacteria grew inside the tomb that carried disease and death, and in Paris, the astronomer Lancelin said, Tutankhamun had avenged recent accounts of curses. The hieroglyphs were not deciphered until the beginning of the 19th century by Jean-François Champollion, so any reports of curses prior to that date would fall under the misfortune of dealing with mummy and other artifacts from tombs. Louis Pincher wrote an account in 1699 where he recorded how a Polish traveler bought 2 mummies and embarked on a cruise with these mummies in the cargo hold. Disturbed by the repeated visions of 2 ghosts and a sea storm that did not subside until the mummies were dumped into the sea. Zahi Hawass, an archaeologist and excavator at Kalmabu Bilo, stated that he moved a number of artifacts from the Greco-Roman site. On the day he did this, his cousin died, and in memory of that day his uncle died, and on the 3rd anniversary of him his aunt died. Years later, when he dug the tombs of the pyramid builders at Giza, he faced this curse: whoever enters this tomb, or does evil deeds against it, or destroy it, the crocodile will be their opponent in the water, and the snakes their opponent on the ground. The hippopotamus may be against them in the water, and the scorpion against them on the water. Although he was not superstitious, he decided not to disturb the mummies. However, he later participated in transporting 2 of the mummy's children from the Bahariya oasis to the museum and later stated that he was being attacked by children in his dreams. This phenomenon did not stop until the father of the mummies was re-included with the children in the museum. Then he came to the conclusion that the mummy should not be displayed, although it is less harmful than allowing the general public to enter the tombs. Hawass recorded another incident related to a sick boy who loved ancient Egypt and then underwent a miracle of healing in the Egyptian museum when he was looking into the eyes of the mummy of King Ahmose. The boy was then able to read everything he found in ancient Egyptian antiquities, especially those related to the Hyksos period. Real or fantasy? After that, calamities followed, and death began to reap the vast majority, if not all, who participated in the celebration, and most of the deaths were due to that mysterious fever with delirium and shiver that leads to death. In fact, it was more than a fever in many cases. A secretary died, Howard Carter, without any reason, and then his father committed suicide out of grief for him. During the funeral of the secretary, the horse who was pulling the coffin cart trampled a young child and killed him. Many of those who contributed in one way or another to the discovery of the cemetery went crazy, and some committed suicide without any reason, which baffled archaeologists who found themselves in front of a mystery that has no explanation, and it is worth noting that many archaeologists have stated that this curse of the pharaohs is just a myth, and the deaths that occurred cannot go beyond chance, and the evidence for this is Howard Carter himself, the owner of the discovery of the tomb of the pharaoh Tutankhamun, which did not happen to him anything, and despite that, many of them do not dare to discover other pharaonic tombs, not even to visit the pharaonic monuments. Most of the wealthy who acquired some of the expensive pharaonic antiquities and statues disposed of them, including fear of that alleged curse. But the truth that some people believe is that there is no curse of the pharaohs, with evidence that the tombs that open and people die in are closed for thousands of years, so the air must spoil in them, which causes suffocation and then death when inhaling this air. Others claim that these accidents and suicides were because of the jinn, with evidence that it is known about the pharaohs that they were one of the most powerful magicians of the world. They may have defended the cemeteries by harnessing the jinn to defend them, but scientists have not yet found a scientific explanation for this phenomenon. Curse of King Tutankhamun. Belief in the curse piqued the interest of many due to the mysterious deaths of some members of Howard Carter's team and other notable visitors to the tomb shortly thereafter. The Carter team opened the tomb of Tutankhamun, KV62, in 1922 AD, ushering in the new era of Egyptology. The famous Egyptologist James Henry Breasted worked with Carter shortly after the tomb was first opened. Report how Carter sent a messenger to errand his house. On his way home, he thought he had heard a faint sound like someone's crying, and upon arriving at the entrance he saw a bird cage occupied by cobras, the symbol of the Egyptian monarchy. Canary Carter died on the mouth, and this fueled local rumors of the curse. Arthur Weigel, the former Inspector General of Egyptian government antiquities, reported that this was explained by the fact that Carter's house was broken into by the same royal cobra that protects the king's head to strike enemies on the same day that the king's tomb was broken. The New York Times reported on the 22nd of this incident. December 1922 AD, the first mysterious death was Lord Carnarvon. He was bitten by a mosquito, and later, while accidentally shaving the bite wound. Then he became infected, which led to blood poisoning. 2 weeks before Carnarvon's death, Marie Corelli wrote a fictional letter to the New York World in which she quoted a mysterious book that asserted that terrible punishment would be inflicted on the intruder of the sealed tomb. This was followed by a revolution in the media, with reports that a curse was found on the king's tomb, but this is not true. Arthur Conan Doyle, author of Sherlock Holmes, suggested at the time that Carnarvon's death occurred due to items placed by Tutankhamun's priests to protect the royal tomb, and this contributed to increased media attention. Arthur stated that, 6 weeks before Carnarvon's death, he saw him laughing and making jokes when he entered the king's tomb and witnessed him telling a nearby reporter, H. F. Mortan, "I'm going to give him 6 weeks to live." The first autopsy of King Tutankhamun's body by Dr. Derry found a healed scar on the king's left cheek, but since Carnarvon had been buried 6 months earlier, it was not possible to determine whether the location of the wound on the king matched the fatal mosquito bite of Carnarvon. In 1925, anthropologist Henry Field and Breasted visited a shrine and noted the kindness of Wood Carter. He also reported how a paperweight given to Carter's friend, Sir Bruce Ingham, of a mummified hand with a wrist and a bracelet bearing the sign of a cursed, moved my body. Fire, water, and pestilence shall come to him. Shortly after receiving the gift, Ingram's house burned down, followed by a flood when it was rebuilt. Howard Carter was completely skeptical of curses. In his memoirs, he quoted The Stranger, explaining that in May 1926 he saw a jackal of the same type as Anubis, the guardian of the dead, for the first time in more than 35 years of working in the desert. Skeptics noted that many of those who visited or helped discover the tomb lived long, healthy lives. The study showed that of the 85 people who were present when the tomb and coffin were opened, only 8 were killed within 10 years. All the others were alive, including Howard Carter, who later died of lymphoma at the age of 64 in 1939. Possible explanations. Possible explanations. Some speculated that there would have been a deadly fungus planted in the enclosed tombs that were released into the air when they were opened. Arthur Conan Doyle favors this idea, and speculates that fungi were deliberately created to punish grave robbers. While there is no evidence that these pathogens killed Lord Carnarvon, there is no doubt that dangerous substances were accumulating in the ancient tombs. However, in the concentrations present, it is usually only dangerous pathogens for people with weakened immunity. Air samples taken from inside the coffin openings showed high levels of formaldehyde, ammonia, and hydrogen sulfide, all of which are toxic, but they were easily detected by their strong odors. Hydrogen sulfide is detectable in low concentrations, up to 100 ppm, and acts as a nerve agent on the sense of smell, though 1000 ppm, capable of killing a person for the first inhalation. Deaths attributed to Tutankhamun's curse. The tomb was opened on the 29th of February, 1922 AD. Lord Carnarvon, the financial supporter of the excavation team, was present during the opening of the tomb. He died on the 5th of April, 1923 AD, after being bitten by a mosquito and infected him. He died 4 months and 7 days after opening the tomb. George J. Gould I died in the French Riviera on May 16, 1923, after developing a fever after visiting a grave. The Egyptian Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy died on July 10, 1923, shot dead by his wife. Honorable Colonel Aubrey Herbert, Member of Parliament, Carnarvon's half-brother, became completely blind and died on the 26th of September, 1923 CE, due to blood poisoning through a dental operation aimed at restoring his sight. Wolf Joel, a South African millionaire and tomb visitor, was shot dead in Johannesburg on November 13, 1923, by blackmailer Baron Kurt von Belthium, whose real name was Carl Friedrich Moritz Coetzee. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, the physician who x-rayed the mummy of Tutankhamun, died on January 15, 1924 CE from a mysterious illness. Sir Lee Stack, Governor-General of Sudan, died on November 19, 1924 AD, assassinated while driving in Cairo. Arthur Cruttendon Mace A.C. Mace, a member of Carter's excavation team, died in 1928 of arsenic poisoning. Honorable Mervyn Herbert, the half-brother of Carnarvon and the brother of the aforementioned Aubrey Herbert, died on May 25, 1929 AD, according to what was reported, of malaria pneumonia. Honorable Commander Richard Bathell, Carter's personal secretary, died on November 15, 1929, after being found suffocated in his bed. Richard Letchell Pilkington Bathall, 3rd Baron of Westbury, father of the above-mentioned, died on February 20, 1930 AD, supposedly throwing himself from the 7th floor of his apartment. Howard Carter opened his cemetery on February 16, 1923, and died more than a decade later on March 2, 1939. However, some still attribute his death to a curse.